You are listening to the Push Media Podcast Network.
This is good shit.
Before we get started, and boy do we have a lot to talk about, like the Mormon Church proving to be the Mormon Church, which is of course a synonym, Mormon is, for money laundering organization that exploits families. So that's just step one. I don't ever want anyone to get it confused, get it twisted, that I do not respect the Mormon Church. Now, that's not to say I don't like Mormons. I like Mormons. I also like Labrador Retrievers. That might have been a little mean. But what else? Am I the mean one when the Mormon Church is hiding $100 billion from the IRS, claiming it is in a fund in case Jesus comes back? Not even the right one, I might add. So the Mormon Church done fucked up, and there's some other stuff to talk about. But before we get into the UFOs, potentially aliens, spy balloons, before any of that, I would like to give a shout out to my Uncle Darnell locked up in prison. He loved fish and grits and all the pimp shit, and everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah, you're. Because my Uncle Darnell, who is locked up in prison, he gave me a bit of advice once. And he said to me, if it looked like a duck, quack like a duck, it's probably a goddamn alien. And that he's colder than a polar bear's toenails. That's what my Uncle Darnell done told me, and I think that is cogent advice to offer the rest of the world. Because we all thought spy balloons were an issue. We thought China was flying spy balloons. And turns out China did fly a spy balloon. And they accept responsibility for it. And they said that was us. My bad. And we were like, fine, just don't do it again. And then there kept being UFOs in the sky. There were UFOs in Alaska, North Carolina, off the coast of California, in other countries too. And now I have arrived at the unsettling conclusion that my Uncle Darnell locked up in prison, who loved fish and grits and all the pimp shit, was correct. Because he is right when he says if it looked like a duck, quack like a duck, it's probably a goddamn alien. And I know I tend to sound hyperbolic. I tend to exaggerate because I want to make money talking. That's really the main reason. But I'm not an idiot. I'm not stupid. I have a noggin on me. I can do some thinking. And let me walk you through the process of elimination that I used to arrive at the conclusion that all of these UFOs and unidentified flying objects are literally aliens. So, this is how I did it. China flew their weather balloon over us, and we were like, you fucked up, don't do that. China was like, you got us, my bad, we won't. And then we kept finding unidentified flying objects in the sky. And it was getting weird because China was like, that's not us. And we were like, China, you better tell us the truth. Don't be playing games. And China was like, dude, it is not us. It is really not us. And that that is a problem because let me walk you through my thinking. China probably wouldn't get caught flying a spy balloon in our airspace and then immediately, less than a week later, try and do it again. I don't think China would do that. I actually believe them. Believe it or not, I believe China here in this instance. So, allow me to offer this next point. If these unidentified flying objects are not Chinese, whose could they be? Let me ask you that. Because we live in a world where there are only two countries that are capable of having technology like this. And the two countries that are capable of having technology or aircrafts like this are China and the United States. Now, I believe China when they say this is not theirs, which leaves the United States. Maybe these are our technologies. Maybe these are our flying crafts or drones or whatever. Okay, but then why are we shooting them out of the sky? If these are not Chinese, that means they could only be American, and America is shooting them out of the sky, which doesn't make sense. You wouldn't build a spacecraft, hovercraft, anything. You wouldn't build a drone, any type of plane, and then shoot it out of the sky just because. That's not what's happening. There is no shot in hell that we built these and then shot them out of the sky for target practice. So, what's left? I'll allow you a minute to arrive at this conclusion on your own, but I'll ask you, what's left? Because there's two countries that can build these UFOs, and it's not China, and America's shooting them out of the sky. So whose are they? And I can promise you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, these UFOs don't belong to fucking Ecuador. They don't belong to Peru. There's only two countries it could be, and it's not either one of those two. So again, I ask you, what is left? Once you've arrived at the unsettling conclusion that these are literally aliens, I will offer some additional points. So, the White House, in several, the press secretary gave several interviews and was obviously asked about these UFOs and what was going on. What are they? And the press secretary was like, these are 100% not UFOs. Don't worry about that. These are not UFOs. Press conference ends. White House creates a task force to investigate UFOs. So, if we are to follow the logic thus far, these could only belong to China or America, but they're not Chinese and America's shooting them down. But the American government is saying these are not UFOs, but they're creating a special task force to investigate the UFOs, which of course these are not, according to them. A little suspicious, don't make a ton of sense, does it? And another question I have in regards to these UFOs is, why are we shooting them out of the sky? Because if you remember, over the summer, there were so many UFO sightings. It was like the thing. You had Marco Rubio not shutting his mouth about UFOs. You had a bunch of people claiming that the American people deserve to know. And then there were all of these, the footage released from like the Navy of these unidentified flying objects. And you would hear pilots through like radio transmissions explain, what the shit is this? And that was a thing all summer. All summer we kept seeing UFOs. We kept talking about them. But you know what didn't happen one time? Not one time over the summer of UFOs did anyone suggest we should shoot these down. There was not one instance of the United States shooting down any of these objects. Why are we shooting them down now? Isn't that a valid question? Why are we shooting them down now? What changed? And there is a pattern of behavior from UFOs. Anytime the world gets close to imminent nuclear war, kind of like it is right now, it seems like aliens show up. It seems like UFOs show up. So, again, if it's not China and America's shooting them and no other country could be flying them, what are they? Are you slowly arriving at the unsettling conclusion that I am? My Uncle Darnell locked up in prison was right. If it looked like a duck, quacked like a duck, it's probably a goddamn alien, which is crazy. Because, and I'm serious, there is now a more than 0% chance that I could get drafted into a world war involving aliens. That is a true statement. There is a more than 0% chance that happens. Wrap your head around that. It ain't great, man. It ain't good. But then there's some other logical questions that I would have next. Like, if these are aliens, it's probably not the first time we've come in contact with aliens. So, like, what's going on? Why are these aliens being such troublemakers? Well, could just be a different species of aliens we've never seen before. I don't know. Maybe I've gone into the alien thing a little too much. I don't want to sound crazy because, you know, the thing about being right is you tend to sound crazy. So let's shift gears for a minute and let me talk about the goddamn motherfucking Mormon Church. Now, I can't be any more clear in how much I truly do not respect the Mormon Church. Now, the Mormon Church, just to remind all of you in case you are unaware, is a church, quote unquote, that happens to have an extensive business portfolio. The Mormon Church, the church has stake in Coca-Cola, Marriott Hotels, Kraft. Like, literally, every Fortune 500 company, the Mormon Church has their hands in. So, that would be one of the first points to make. The Catholic Church doesn't have shares in Kraft. You know what I mean? Baptist churches are not heavily invested in biotech stock. If you're a church, or if you claim to be a church, I feel like maybe you shouldn't have a business portfolio. That's just something I think. Call me crazy. But if you can just tolerate the fact that the Mormon Church Incorporated is largely one of the biggest shareholders in both food and shelter and entertainment, let me make it even weirder for you. So the Mormon Church courtesy of a Mormon whistleblower who is a gem, who is a person who should be celebrated, because he came across some paperwork that revealed that the Mormon Church had a fund of $100 billion stashed away, hidden from the IRS, not reported, never paid taxes on. I'll say it again, $100 billion. Not 100 million, $100 billion. They had $100 billion that they were shielding from the IRS, the church, the Mormon Church, the church that is in control of a state of our country. We just gave Utah to the Mormon Corporation. There is an oligarchy that exists in America right now, and it is in goddamn Utah, and it is propped up by a church, again, a church, quote-unquote church, that has shares in Kraft and Nabisco and Marriott hotels. And they've been hiding $100 billion. And do you know what the reason? This is the best part. Do you know what the reason for the Mormon... do you know what the reason for I almost did it again. The reason for the Mormon Church hiding $100 billion was they thought, and I'm being very literal and serious here, this is a fund of money that we are stashing away, not paying taxes on illegally, because Jesus might come back. The Mormon Church's explanation for the reason they had a fund of $100 billion hidden from the IRS was because we might need this money in case Jesus comes back. Because if Jesus comes back, he is going to want $100 billion. Jesus ain't coming back for free, dummy. The Mormon Church, literally, that was their explanation. They were like, sorry about the $100 billion we've hidden. We hid it because we think Jesus could come back any day now. And when he does, he is going to need money because he's, Jesus. It's not like he could do anything else. He's going to need money. $100 billion of it. When are we ever, as a collective group of people here in America, going to come to the conclusion that the Mormon Church is a goddamn problem? And part of the reason I have such an issue with the Mormon Church is because I felt like I was duped before I really did some digging and, found out that Joseph Smith, who is, again, if your church was started by a guy named Joe Smith, you should ask some questions. But once I did some digging into the fact that Joe Smith has been arrested for, lying before, or Brigham Young, violently racist, or the fact the Mormon Church didn't allow black people to become pastors until the 70s, or the fact we just gave them a state, or the fact that they are a organization that when they found out they might have relics out there from their made-up beliefs, i.e. the Solomon Letters, which were about a talking fish, the Mormon Church facilitated a series of car bombs to go off in Salt Lake City. This is not a good organization, and they're hiding $100 billion because Jesus might come back and need a loan. Does it make any sense, literally at all? And I know, especially when you talk about religion, you don't want to come off like you're not respecting someone else's point of view, even if their point of view is literally retarded. And in the case of the Mormons, it's literally retarded. I mean, your God's named Joe Smith. Again, wow. But I don't think, actually, what I'm trying to say is that feeling you get when you want to criticize let's just say a religion or a church, and you're like, I don't know, that seems mean, that feels wrong. The organizations, the churches that are doing this type of evil shit like the Mormon Church, they are very much aware of that fact, of that burden of morality you put on yourself. And they hide behind it. They shield themselves behind it. They shield themselves behind the idea that people generally want to be good people. And then, because they know they can get away with it, they will ask for money and more money, and they will invest it because they're a church, which obviously means they're going to have an extensive business portfolio. Now, I don't want to be a revolutionary, although some of us just simply are thrust into that role. But I think maybe it is high time to put an end to the Utah Caliphate. I think it is wild that we let a church take control of a state, all of the positions within that state, from city council members to the police, from top to bottom. We just gave over the state of Utah to the Mormon Church. And the Mormon Church, in turn, which was, again, a church started by a guy named fucking Joe, just hopped around town to town, getting kicked out and murdered until they finally settled in Utah, which we just gave them. And I don't think that's right. And I think with the latest bit of evidence against the Mormon Corporation being that they're hiding $100 billion in the name of Jesus coming back and needing a payday loan as the latest example that maybe we fucked up, that maybe we shouldn't have given a state to a cult started by a guy named Joe. But alas, here we are. So, and before we transition topics, I want to say one more time, I don't have any issue with Mormons particularly on an individual level. I feel sympathy and empathy for those people because they're good people who were brainwashed. That's literally and truly what happened. But again, the Mormon Church, the organization, the incorporated business portfolio of the business of the Mormon Church can, and I'm going to pause for dramatic effect, fuck itself all the way off. So, speaking of a caliphate, I saw an article this past week, and you probably have, but probably haven't because it's being wildly suppressed. But I saw an article that said, chemical explosion following a train crash in East Palestine. And my first reaction to that was, well, that's probably not in Ohio, but it turns out it is. So if you haven't heard, because again, it's being wildly suppressed and journalists were being arrested for talking about it, there was a train crash in Ohio, in the town of East Palestine, which again, wild name for a town in Ohio. But this train crash has left a chemical cloud of gas that is visible from goddamn space right now. And this train was carrying dangerous chemicals. Now, it was carrying chemicals that are like used to make like PVC pipes and shit. So it's not like a train full of mustard gas exploded. And I don't know much about chemistry, but I did a little reading. And some of the chemicals that were on this train, while yes, they're used for like common industrial needs like PVC piping and you know whatnot, if you were to combine some of these chemicals in a lab under the right resources and supervision, you could create deadly gas that was used in World War I. Literally, that's a true thing. I'm not making it up. And what else is interesting is that the chemicals that were on the train, they were not immediately reported. At first, it was like just this one, and then it was another one, and then it was this, and then it was that. So the story kept changing wildly. Originally, there was a train that crashed that had vinyl chloride, which is just a chemical we use to make PVC piping. And then the cloud continues to grow over this town. And then the town is evacuated. And then people return to find their animals, their pets, dead. Fish in any body of water near the town, dead. And then it starts to roll out that there were other chemicals on the train. And then this was a fun bit of information I found, which, and I'm not kidding, vinyl chloride is a common chemical used for PVC piping. However, motherfucker, if you were to burn vinyl chloride, part of what would happen is the release of a toxic gas called phosgene and hydrogen chloride. Now, phosgene and hydrogen chloride were chemical weapons used during World War I that have since been outlawed by the Geneva Convention. Not that the Geneva Convention means shit. I mean, we have black sites around the world. Shout out Manila, Thailand. But point of what I'm trying to say is this train that was carrying chemicals for the government, probably about 45 minutes away from the Air Force Base in Ohio where we keep aliens. No one told me that. FBI, stop listening. That seems a little weird, right? I mean, chemicals are transported every single day across the country for a whole variety of non-controversial reasons. Vinyl chloride is needed to make PVC piping. However, there was a bunch of other chemicals on that train as well. And it seems like any living thing that was left exposed to those chemicals in East Palestine, including house pets, dogs, cats, fish, underwater, are all now dead. Again, I don't want to be the crazy conspiracy guy, but again, is it not a little strange that a train carrying wildly deadly chemicals crashed about 45 minutes from where we keep aliens? Again, NSA, no one told me that specifically. What am I to think? Because if we were to then refresh ourselves as to the goddamn aliens happening in the world right now, why are we shooting them down? Because we had UFOs happen all summer. No one said shoot those down. But now we're suddenly shooting down UFOs. And we really don't think it's China, and they can't be ours, and no other country can fucking make a UFO like this. So, let me just walk you through a hypothetical situation that I have in my head. If you are the government, and you are all of a sudden under duress, under attack from an enemy that you don't really know everything about yet. You can't. How could you? Because we're not even being forthright in what we know. They're not UFOs, but we are creating a special UFO task force. We didn't shoot any UFO out of the sky over the summer when we kept seeing them, but we are shooting them the fuck out of the sky now. So, if you are potentially facing a threat from an enemy that you know very little about, and again, I'm just running a hypothetical by you, what would be the type of weapon that you would try and prepare against an enemy who is perplexing at the very least? If I was tasked with that responsibility, I think my first go-to thought would be a chemical gas, would be something that will probably cover most of our bases. We can't just shoot guns at these UFOs that are capable of laws that defy physics. We can't just have a meeting with the aliens because Eisenhower already did that. If we needed to prepare, I would think we would really break out the big guns and try and make chemical weapons. That would be my best guess. If we had to fight an alien race that we were unaware of, all of their strengths and weaknesses, and I was tasked with coming up with the best weapon against them, my instinct would be, let's break out some chemical gases, y'all. Let's break out the PVC piping and the World War II conventions. Let's break out the machinations of death that were so effective the Geneva Convention outlawed them after we used them. Now, this is probably one of my more out there theories. I am acknowledging that this is truly crazy even for me. But, and here's something that's a little strange, there was a journalist arrested for trying to report about what happened in East Palestine, Ohio. Why would the government arrest a journalist? Because, let me just walk you through something here. If a train crash happens and explodes, you can't really hide that. It's not very easy to make a crashed train full of chemical gas something people are not aware of. That will be a cat let out of the proverbial bag. So, if you're the government and there was an accident on that scale that happened that is literally impossible from being hidden from the government, from the people, you can't hide that. So, why would you arrest journalists who are asking questions? Because it's not like the moment to hide the fact the train crash happened is long gone. We can now see the chemical cloud from space. So, if I'm the government, I would think, you know what, we've missed our opportunity to completely lie. Why would you then arrest a reporter asking questions? Because it's not like the reporter's going to ask a question that forces you to admit the crash train happened. You just need to literally look from space and you can see it. So, again, I ask you, why are we arresting reporters? That's a hallmark sign of the government trying to hide some shit. The government does not arrest people who are asking stupid, meaningless questions. The government does not place gag orders on people who are asking something unrelated to what just happened. They tend to do that to people who ask very specific, very cogent, very pressing questions. So, I say all this to say, what do you think it is? Because I don't think it's China. America's shooting them out of the sky. The government has claimed these are not UFOs and then immediately set up a UFO task force. A chemical explosion happened 45 minutes from where we keep aliens. Again, NSA. No one told me that specifically. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, but if it ain't China, it ain't America, probably not Ecuador, and now we're suddenly shooting these things that no one felt we needed to shoot down just this past summer, and there was an explosion of a government train carrying chemicals used in World War I that have since been outlawed by the Geneva Convention, and journalists there asking these types of questions have been arrested. I have simply no choice but to think, and again, this is just me, and again, I know I'm crazy, but to quote my Uncle Darnell locked up in prison, who loved fish and grits and all the pimp shit, if it looked like a duck, quack like a duck, it's definitely aliens.